One of the most difficult parts of being a police officer, and something that can have a long term negative impact on a police officer's mind health, it might not be what you think at all. I'm going to discuss what it is and what you can do to prevent it from happening. So, whether you're a seasoned police officer, you're brand new, or you're interested in a career in law enforcement, this video is for you. Growing up, you always wanted to be a police officer. But what started as a calling just became a paycheck. So imagine you're a cop and you're working the beat, primary response. You're answering radio calls all shift long. Domestic incidents, domestic assaults, thefts, robberies, neighbor disputes, shootings. You do this day in and day out for years. You attend a call, you submit a report, and you move on. You might make the odd arrest, but you put in a report and a report gets handed off to the investigator and it's off to the next call. When you do arrest somebody, you're probably going to release them on scene, especially these days. And even if it is a more serious crime and you end up bringing them in, they're probably going to be placed on conditions and released from the station or the courts within days. You've heard the term revolving door justice system. Well, as a police officer, you're going to deal with that every day in, day out. Even if you work in a different squad or unit within the police department, it's the same thing. You complete paperwork, case prep, warrants, you dot your I's, cross your T's, you do a great job. But the system lets the accused out, and then you move on. Next call, next warrant. Maybe you'll arrest the same person. What happens to the arrested or the accused is out of your control as a cop. But the revolving door justice system, watching victims continue to be victimized day in and day out, it slowly chips away at a person. It eats away at you over time. You might hear or read about these things online once in a while, and of course it's going to cause you stress or make you angry because you have to think of the safety of your own family. And how can there be no accountability? But imagine that you were a cop and you had to deal with this every single day. That was your life. Before I became a police officer, I worked in the trades. I've talked about this before. I enjoyed it and I still enjoy working with my hands. I completed a 4-year apprenticeship, which is something I'm proud of. I traveled to Vancouver recently and I met with a few different police services. It's a beautiful city. I can walk down the streets of Vancouver or Surrey and see buildings that I worked on 25 years ago. Sometimes we started when they were nothing but a hole in the ground, but now they're people's homes, businesses. People are creating lifelong memories in the place that I had a part in building. And I have a huge sense of satisfaction knowing that there was nothing and now there's a finished project, which people can enjoy for years and years. And again, that gives me a sense of satisfaction and pride. I hope you can see where I'm going with this in terms of policing. Every single day, you can read headlines about another suspect arrested while out on bail for some heinous crime, often the exact same crime that they're out on bail for. Officers are getting weapons off the street, dangerous offenders, only to have them return back to the streets, even on the same day, committing the exact same crimes. I've made videos addressing this in the past. This isn't about criminal or justice reform. This is about the mind health of police officers, first responders, and a lack of job satisfaction felt everywhere. Morale is low. It's at an all-time low. This isn't my opinion. These are well-documented facts. There's terms out there: workplace apathy, job dissatisfaction, occupational burnout, and one that I actually find pretty ironic, golden handcuffs. That's basically when somebody stays in an unfulfilling job because of financial incentives, despite a lack of satisfaction. Being a police officer pays well, more or less. Great pension, great benefits. And because of that, people might feel the need to stay, even if you've been doing it for 20 years. Instead of changing careers, which is not what I'm suggesting here, you might feel stuck because you have bills, mortgage, life happens. I mean, who doesn't? But occupational burnout, which I mentioned earlier, a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion caused by prolonged stress and a lack of fulfillment in a job. It's a very real thing. And you can't expect police just to turn off their feelings. That's like asking them to turn off their humanity. And I don't think people want a bunch of mindless robots policing the streets, answering radio calls. Research shows that the average person, they tend to go through about 3 to 7 careers before they retire. And the number is more like 5 or 7 for current and upcoming generations of workers. Change is normal, but you want to stick it out because it's a good job. And there's lots of positive aspects to policing. It's still a very worthwhile career, which I recommend to anybody who may be interested. Now, if you're a police officer with an online presence, there might be a certain level of satisfaction that comes with the level of engagement that police officers enjoy just because they're police officers. The pages are full of positive comments and thanks, but I've said it before, the majority of police, they're not online at all, and they don't hear those things. And it's really not fair for cops who are online to constantly receive this praise while other officers in different units where it doesn't make sense to be online, they're working hard behind the scenes and they never really hear anything about it. I'm lucky that I grew up around police officers and emergency services workers in general my entire life. My dad and family members being in law enforcement, I've had access to a lot of police who have had fantastic careers and they're retired now. Some have been retired for almost 30 years. I still talk to a lot of them and I'm very thankful for the wisdom and advice that they give. Just some words to start off here. It's very important to have hobbies and interests outside of policing. Something that can provide you with a strong sense of accomplishment, which you might not get at all from work. It doesn't have to be a side business where you're making money, although that's great if you can do both, but it could be something small. Painting, carpentry, fishing. Hopefully you catch some fish and you feel like you've accomplished something and it doesn't actually make things worse. Maybe starting a YouTube channel to pass on some of the information and the knowledge that you have in your own mind to others. Just something to provide you with fulfillment outside of your career. Not one retired police officer I've ever spoken to has told me that they wish they spent more time in court, more time writing up warrants, looking for overtime, breaking down more doors. But I've heard way too many times that they wish they spent more time with their family, with their kids, getting to know their kids and their interests, just getting work out of their frame of mind. And that can be very difficult for a police officer because being a police officer, it often becomes your identity, part of your identity, whether you like it or not. When I was a kid, I used to watch police TV shows and movies, and everybody likes it when they get the bad guy at the end and they slam the jail doors after going above and beyond. Book them. Well, things have changed, and that's not really the outcome as much as it used to be. Politics has kind of weaseled its way into the police service and the courts. Officers need to look for job satisfaction in other ways. One of the things I always enjoyed was there was lots of coffee shops around the city. The places close to my station, my division where I worked, they didn't have a drive-through. So at the beginning of my shift, when I could, I would start by going and grabbing a coffee. I'd park the car, get out, walk inside, and I get to know the employees. There were schools nearby, so there's always young people in there. A lot of regular civilians just grabbing coffee and snacks, going about their day. And I really liked the little simple interactions. They shut it down for a bit for renovations, and I ended up going to a different coffee shop a little bit further away that I would just go through the drive-through. It was one of those places that didn't really have a seating area, so I would just go through the drive-through. And I really miss parking the car and going in to grab my coffee. I felt like I was missing something by going through the drive-through, even though it was faster. It was around that time that I started talking about online how important those simple interactions with the community were. Not just important for the community, I should say, but also important for the police officers. Connecting with people in a good way, not just by attending radio calls. When I speak to retired officers and they talk about what they miss, sure, they miss a camaraderie and truly serving and protecting with pride. But they also miss the simple interactions. Just being a police officer in a car, waving hi to the people in the car next to them. I'm sorry if I sound like I repeat myself with some of these videos because I do. But these discussion points, which are passed down, they're important and they need to be passed down. The world's changed. And so has the attitude of the younger generation of employees entering the job market and their entitlement, not just in policing, everywhere. Police services, they're having a hard time finding officers to fill the roles which historically they meant your career is your life. You're always working or you're always in overtime or in court, preparing for court. People are putting their personal lives before their career, and that might not be such a bad thing. Some of the same movies and TV shows that I referenced earlier, when they finally got the bad guy, it was also showing them working around the clock and putting their job ahead of their family. Sometimes their personal lives were a mess because of it. It's still one of the best jobs out there, and it can be very fulfilling. But have some interests, have some hobbies outside of the job. Something which you can look back on and really feel that sense of accomplishment. Don't base your fulfillment or don't base your life achievements on crime or the criminal empire. That's really all I can say. Listen, I would love to know your thoughts on this video. If you have any advice or wise words, I would love to hear what you have to say. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Be safe out there, look after one another, and perhaps we will see you again.